Imagine walking through a city where nearly 50,000 people disappeared in a single afternoon. The streets are quiet. Apartment windows stare back like empty eyes. Children's toys sit where they were dropped in the spring of 1986. And yet, visitors say the silence is never complete. Some claim they hear footsteps in abandoned school corridors. Others say a child's laughter echoes through a kindergarten that has not seen a student in nearly 4 decades. And sometimes, deep within the ruined reactor complex, workers say they have heard something stranger. A voice calling out through the silence. Tonight, we are not simply revisiting the Chernobyl disaster. We are following the strange stories that grew in its shadow. The legends of Pripyat, the ghosts of the exclusion zone, and the uneasy line between history and imagination. To understand why people speak of ghosts here, we must first return to the moment when this city stopped in time. It was early morning on April 26, 1986. At 1:24 a.m., inside reactor number 4 at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, a safety test went catastrophically wrong. Operators were attempting to simulate a power failure. The goal was to see if the plant's turbines could provide enough electricity to keep the cooling pumps running until emergency generators started. But the reactor had been pushed into an unstable condition. Safety systems had been manually disabled. Control rods had been withdrawn. Steam pressure inside the core began to rise. When the operators finally pressed the emergency shutdown button, known as AZ5, something unexpected happened. Instead of calming the reactor, the control rods briefly increased the reaction. Within seconds, the power level surged far beyond anything the reactor was designed to handle. Fuel channels ruptured. Water flashed instantly into steam. And then the reactor exploded. 2 massive blasts tore through the building. A 1,000-ton concrete lid was thrown into the air. Chunks of burning graphite and radioactive fuel scattered across the roof and surrounding structures. In a matter of seconds, the core of Reactor 4 was exposed to the open sky. A cloud of radioactive particles began drifting across the countryside. But in the nearby city of Pripyat, life continued as if nothing had happened. Before the disaster, Pripyat was considered one of the most desirable cities in the Soviet Union. It had been built specifically for workers at the nuclear power plant. The average age of its residents was only 26. Wide boulevards cut between modern apartment blocks. Schools, sports halls, and cultural centers gave the city the feeling of a carefully designed future. Workers earned salaries higher than the national average. There were cafes, cinemas, and hydrofoil boats on the nearby river. The city even planned to plant 50,000 rose bushes, one for every resident. Pripyat was meant to be a symbol of the nuclear age, a place where science and modern industry promised a comfortable life. But on the morning of April 26th, something invisible had already begun to change that future. Radiation from the exposed reactor core was spreading across the city. Firefighters arrived at the power plant within minutes of the explosion. Many believed they were responding to an ordinary electrical fire. They climbed onto the roof and began clearing burning debris. Some of those fragments were pieces of graphite from the reactor core itself. Within minutes, the men were absorbing lethal doses of radiation. Witnesses later recalled strange symptoms appearing almost immediately. A metallic taste in the mouth, a burning sensation on the skin. For some, their skin began turning a deep reddish color within an hour. Yet even as the scale of the disaster became clearer inside the plant, the city, just 3 kilometers away, remained unaware. Children went to school. Couples walked through parks. According to later stories, some residents even gathered on a nearby railway bridge to watch the strange blue glow above the reactor building, a place that would eventually be called the Bridge of Death. But historians and researchers have found little solid evidence for a large crowd standing there that night, or for the claim that everyone who did so later died. The bridge story, like many others around Chernobyl, sits somewhere between memory, fear, and myth. For 36 hours, the residents of Pripyat continued living in the shadow of the destroyed reactor. It was not until the afternoon of April 27th that the evacuation order finally arrived. Hundreds of buses rolled into the city. Loudspeakers announced that residents would be leaving temporarily. They were told to pack documents and essential items, and that they would return in 3 days. Many people left their homes exactly as they were. Laundry still hanging on balconies, books open on desks, dinner dishes left in the sink. In less than 3 hours, nearly 50,000 people were gone. Pripyat became a silent city, and it would never again be permanently inhabited. Over the following months, the area surrounding the reactor was sealed off. A 30-kilometer exclusion zone was established. Villages were abandoned. Entire communities disappeared from maps. Hundreds of thousands of workers, soldiers, and volunteers were sent into the zone to contain the damage. They became known as the liquidators. Some cleared radioactive debris from the reactor roof. Others buried contaminated soil or demolished entire towns. Many worked in shifts lasting less than 2 minutes because radiation levels were too high for longer exposure. Their efforts prevented an even larger disaster, but the cost was immense. Thousands developed serious health problems in the years that followed, and for many families, the full human toll of Chernobyl would take decades to become clear. As the years passed, nature slowly reclaimed the empty city. Trees grew through cracked pavement. Animals moved into abandoned buildings. The Ferris wheel in Pripyat's amusement park rusted in silence. It had been scheduled to open on May Day, just 5 days after the explosion. It never carried a single passenger. Visitors today often describe the city as frozen in time. School books still open to lessons from April 1986. Gas masks scattered across classroom floors. Hospital beds left exactly where patients once lay. But the physical ruins are only part of the atmosphere people describe. Because alongside the history of Chernobyl, another kind of story began to grow. Stories about things that people claim still move through the empty streets. One of the most unusual legends is known as the Black Bird of Chernobyl. According to several accounts that appeared years after the disaster, workers at the power plant were said to have reported strange sightings in the days before the explosion. They described a dark figure flying over the facility at night. Its wingspan was said to be enormous. Some claimed its eyes glowed red in the darkness. Others insisted the creature had no visible head. The reports were never formally investigated. In fact, researchers who have spoken with local residents and historians have found no clear evidence that this legend existed in the region at the time of the accident. It largely appears in later English-language retellings. After the explosion, the story began spreading in articles, books, and eventually online discussions about Chernobyl. Some compared the creature to another famous legend. In the 1960s, people in the American town of Point Pleasant reported seeing a large winged figure shortly before the collapse of the Silver Bridge. That creature became known as the Mothman. Because of the similarities, some observers began calling the Chernobyl figure a European version of the same omen, a harbinger appearing before tragedy. But there is no physical evidence that such a creature ever existed. Most historians and folklorists believe the Blackbird legend was shaped, or even largely created, long after the disaster, inspired by the Mothman story and the eerie reputation of Chernobyl itself. Human memory often searches for warning signs in hindsight. When a disaster occurs, the mind tries to reconstruct the past. Small details can grow into something much larger. What may have been an unusual bird, aircraft, or simply a story told years later becomes something mysterious, a symbol of fate. Another group of stories comes from explorers who enter the abandoned buildings of Pripyat. Over the past 2 decades, the exclusion zone has attracted photographers, historians, and urban explorers from around the world. Some arrive legally with guided tours. Others sneak past checkpoints to explore the ruins alone. These visitors often describe a strange feeling inside the city, an unusual quiet, the absence of normal human sounds, and sometimes, they say, something else. Footsteps in empty hallways, doors moving in the wind, shapes glimpsed in dark stairwells. Some paranormal investigators have attempted to document these experiences. In one widely discussed case, a team using thermal imaging cameras reported detecting human-shaped heat signatures inside an abandoned hospital building. But when they searched the rooms, no one was there. Skeptics point out that thermal equipment can easily misinterpret environmental conditions. Sunlight trapped in walls or moving animals can produce similar patterns. In abandoned structures, shifting air currents and settling materials can create unexpected sounds. So while the footage and recordings can look eerie, there is no confirmed evidence of actual apparitions, only technology and human senses reacting to a very complex physical environment. Yet the stories continue to circulate. Perhaps because the environment itself encourages imagination. When a place is filled with reminders of lives interrupted so suddenly, it is easy to feel as though the past is still present. One of the most frequently mentioned locations is the hospital basement in Pripyat. Shortly after the explosion, firefighters who had battled the reactor blaze were taken there for treatment. Their clothing had become heavily contaminated with radioactive particles. Doctors removed the uniforms and stored them in the basement. Even decades later, the fabric still contains dangerous levels of radiation. Visitors who approach the room today often carry Geiger counters. As they descend the stairs, the clicking sound grows louder. Some people say the atmosphere in the basement feels unusually heavy, but the sensation is likely explained by something entirely physical. Radiation itself is invisible, yet the knowledge that it surrounds you can create a powerful psychological effect. In places like this, fear and awareness often shape how we interpret what we experience. Another curious story comes from the reactor complex itself. In one reported account from inspection work carried out years after the accident, a physicist described hearing strange noises from a sealed room. According to the story, he believed he heard a voice shouting the word "fire." The room had been closed since the disaster. No workers were present inside. The report quickly spread among employees and visitors, but engineers offered a simpler explanation. Large industrial structures often produce unusual sounds as materials expand and contract. Steam pipes, shifting metal beams, and pressure changes can create noises that resemble human voices. Inside a quiet building, those sounds can echo in surprising ways. Still, the story remains part of Chernobyl's growing folklore, and like many legends, it reflects something deeper than the literal event. Because the exclusion zone is not only a historical site, it is also one of the world's most unusual travel destinations. Every year, thousands of people visit Chernobyl. They pass through security checkpoints, wear long sleeves and protective clothing, and follow carefully planned routes through the abandoned towns. This form of travel is often called dark tourism. People visit places associated with tragedy, not for cheap entertainment, but to feel history in a direct and personal way. For many visitors, walking through Pripyat is profoundly moving. The rusted Ferris wheel, the empty schools, the apartments where calendars still show April 1986. These places create a sense of presence that books and documentaries cannot fully capture. But the popularity of the site has also raised difficult questions. Some worry that the disaster is being transformed into a spectacle. Photographs staged with gas masks and dolls, tourists posing in front of ruined buildings, souvenir stands selling shirts with radioactive symbols. For survivors and former residents, these images can feel uncomfortable. Because the city was not always a ruin, it was once a home. And yet, the human desire to visit places like this may come from something deeper than curiosity. Chernobyl is a reminder of how fragile modern systems can be. A single night of mistakes and design flaws changed the lives of hundreds of thousands of people. It also revealed the dangers of secrecy. For nearly 2 days after the explosion, authorities said nothing publicly. Only when radiation alarms triggered at a nuclear plant in another country did the Soviet government acknowledge the accident. That silence delayed evacuations, and it allowed dangerous myths to spread. Some victims were later told their illnesses were caused by stress rather than radiation. A phrase even appeared in official documents: radiophobia, fear of radiation. For many families, that label felt like a denial of their experience, another kind of haunting. Today, the exclusion zone is both a warning and a paradox. Human habitation remains limited, but wildlife has returned in surprising numbers. Wolves, deer, and even rare horses now roam areas that were once farmland and suburbs. Scientists continue to study the long-term environmental effects of radiation. Some animals show subtle genetic changes, others appear to thrive in the absence of human activity. The landscape itself has become a kind of living laboratory, a place where nature adapts to conditions few ecosystems have experienced before. And still, the legends remain. The black bird in the sky before the disaster, the shadowy figures seen in empty corridors, the strange noises inside the reactor complex. None of these stories have been proven, but they persist. Perhaps because the real story of Chernobyl is already difficult to fully comprehend. A modern city erased in a single weekend. A reactor core that burned for days. Hundreds of thousands of workers risking their lives to contain the damage. In a place like this, imagination fills the silence. And sometimes, the line between memory and myth becomes difficult to see. So when people ask whether Chernobyl is haunted, the answer depends on what we mean by ghosts. There are no confirmed spirits wandering the streets of Pripyat, but the echoes of the disaster remain everywhere. In the abandoned classrooms, in the hospital basement where the firefighters' uniforms still lie, in the stories of the liquidators who climbed onto a burning reactor roof, and in the memories of the families who never returned home. Perhaps that is the real haunting of Chernobyl, not supernatural shadows in empty buildings, but the reminder of a moment when human ambition, secrecy, and technology collided with devastating consequences. A moment that froze a city in time. For many who visit, that lingering weight of history is exactly what they feel, a presence that is real, even if it has no face. If you stood in the middle of Pripyat at night, would you hear ghosts? Or would you simply hear the echo of history, still moving through the empty streets?